Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is a podcast where you hear the real stories of people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn valuable tips from their lives, tips that you can apply to become the best leader you were created to be. When leaders are intentional, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm an author, speaker, business owner, and obviously podcast host. We're glad to have you with us today. Listeners, if you could do me a huge favor as we get rolling today and just really quickly hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button. It makes all those algorithms out there that I do not understand. It makes them happy. So make them happy. That would make me happy. Glad to have you here for this edition of the Intentional Leader Podcast. Today, I'm honored to have Maria Chapman with me. Maria is coming to us from Connecticut here in the United States, and she is an owner of two businesses. She's the owner of Connected Ghostwriting as well as Journey to Success. Maria, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast.
Thank you, Sean. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. It's good to have you, and we're excited to dive into a conversation. And so, Maria, when you and I met about a month ago, I talked to you about the podcast and how people's stories make a huge difference, and your story is an incredible one. And so just kind of walk our people through your kind of professional journey and what you've encountered along the way to bring you to where you are today.
Sure. So in a previous life, I was an educator. I spent 15 years as a teacher and a literacy specialist in elementary schools. And in 2019, I was paralyzed from two different neuromuscular conditions. And, the first thing that started working in the hospital was my hands, even before my jaw started working again. So I couldn't talk, but I could write. And I started writing, started publishing some things online just as a thing to do and keep my brain busy. A few months later, I was medically retired from teaching, and I did the, apply for jobs thing, right? That we think we're supposed to do. So I did that for a while, and I actually got an offer from Scholastic. And then I disclosed my disability and asked for accommodations, and they rescinded the offer.
Wow.
And after that, I just went full bore into entrepreneurship, because even though my body wasn't really working anymore, and I was working on recovery there, my brain still worked just fine.
Yeah.
Right?
So I want to press pause for 1 second and backtrack on the story. So this two different neuromuscular issues caused this disability. How long were you in the hospital? How are you feeling with just the questioning and wondering? Just help us tap into Maria's brain and emotions at that point.
So, the day before I wound up in the hospital, I was leading a professional development seminar for a bunch of teachers. And I had been experiencing symptoms for about a year. And 12 different doctors searching, trying to figure out what's going on. And so when I got out of bed and my legs didn't work, I was like,
wow.
The fear there is, are they ever going to work again? Right?
Yeah.
Is this permanent? By the time I got to the hospital, my jaw wasn't working. My arms weren't working. So I remember sitting in the hallway of the hospital in a wheelchair, and my husband had to go park the car. So I was alone, and there's ambulance drop-off bays right next to me and people running by, and they're asking me questions, but I can't talk.
Wow.
And just this feeling of being trapped inside was probably the most terrifying moment of my life. And the big fear is that it's going to be permanent. The conditions I have, myasthenia gravis and chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, if you want to try that.
That's what I was thinking it was. Yes, exactly.
Both of them actually, you get some relief with rest, right? And of course, the life I was living, I was a teacher, a parent of 5 kids, and I was a weightlifter and a runner. There wasn't a lot of resting in my life,
Wow. Yeah.
right? So I spent 5 days in the hospital, and they ran a bunch of tests, made sure I wasn't having a stroke. But I left without answers and a walker.
Mm.
And so
Wow.
for the next 6 months, I needed a walker around the house and a wheelchair if I left the house. And it took about another year to get diagnosed because I had the 2 different conditions playing with
Mhm.
each other. It didn't fit any particular envelope. But one of the hardest things for me, and I remember this day, I was sitting with my husband. It was the day I got notification from the Teachers Retirement Board that they were medically retiring me. And my husband said, "It's okay. You're going to figure this out."
Yeah.
And I kicked the walker over like a toddler, right? Having a tantrum. And I said, "But I'm not good at anything else."
Ah. Yep.
And I think that's true for so many people who
It
wind
is.
up having to pivot mid-career because you spend all your life training and practicing one thing or one flavor of thing. And because you're not applying it in other areas, you don't necessarily know what's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you throw all the mental health complications of these chronic illnesses on top of it. I was in a bad place.
Yeah. But you persevered and got through that. I like your aspect, though, about not thinking you could do anything else. I've been there before. Mine wasn't due to anything physical, but I was at this place of transition, and my phrase was a little bit different, but the same context. My phrase was, "This is all I know how to do."
Right.
Right? And not realizing how transferable skills really are to different sectors. But then, even beyond that, if you have people skills, leadership skills, that transitions and transfers everywhere.
Yes, 100%. But the trick is, how do you figure that out?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's running into the right person,
Absolutely.
someone to coach you, someone maybe to just believe in you while you're figuring things out. Um, but that's leadership, that's connection, that's everything
Mm-hmm.
business is. And so all through this time I was doing freelance writing, which is, you send out 5,000 pitches and you might get 2 bites. Uh,
Right.
but it kept my brain busy. It gave me something to do. It brought in a little bit of money. And then I established a few private clients, and then they started asking me to write their books.
Hmm.
And so what happened is I leaned into a skill set, and this is how I coach people through the nonprofit journey to success, is I look at, okay, what am I really good at that I like to do that's not particularly difficult for me to do that other people don't like doing?
Yep.
And if
I love
you
it.
can find those 4 components, you've got a business.
Yep. So let me ask you a question. When you think about your teaching years,
Yes.
how much was writing a part of that? So again, it's a transferable skill, but it's in a different context, so we don't see it as transferable.
Right. So I had always been a writer aside from teaching. Um, but while I was teaching, I have too many master's degrees, but one is in curriculum development. And so I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time after I left the classroom and I became a literacy specialist. I spent a lot of time writing curriculum, both for the state of Connecticut and for the district I worked in. Um, and so I had that writing experience, right? But I also had the 3 master's degrees. So the amount of
Yeah.
writing involved in getting
Yep.
those master's degrees really positioned me well, especially for ghostwriting, I think, because
Mhm.
the research, the information gathering, and the synthesis skills
Yep.
just transition very easily into ghostwriting.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you said you got a couple of personal clients and they ended up asking you to write their book. That's like a jump there, right? So what did they
Yeah.
initially bring you on for? Was it just to write some blogs for them, or how'd that roll out?
Yeah, I started writing blogs for a few business owners in the mental health and wellness space. And I would do blogs. They'd want to write an article for Psychology Today, this, that, the other thing. And actually, most of my early clients were not native English speakers.
Hmm.
And that was one of the gifts that I was able to give them, is taking in, what they wanted
Yeah.
to say, um, and getting it down so that the general population can access it. So, um, so yeah, it was a pivot from blogs to books. And so what I did is I looked around and I said, okay, who does this?
Yeah.
Right. And I found Nick Pavlidis, who's the owner of Authority Ghostwriting. He's also the CEO of Podfest. And he had a program for ghostwriting where he'll sort of teach you how to ghostwrite a book.
Hmm.
And I said, great, I'm going to give you some money. Here it is. And I haven't left his orbit since. He is a mentor and a coach. And so once I was at a point where I needed to make that pivot and I didn't have the skills to do it,
Yep.
I looked for someone who did and said, take some money. Would you please teach me?
Hmm.
And, Nick and I have attended a lot of events together. And one of the questions that gets asked is, why are you training your competition?
Mm.
Right. And one of the reasons I love Nick and I love working with him is he doesn't see it that way.
Right.
Right. And his line is always, if I help enough people be successful, I never have to worry about my own success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I like a couple things you've shared there, especially from a leadership context. That one aspect of you've been writing your entire teaching career. You're writing with your three master's degree, those three different theses. So writing's always been there, but the phrase that you used when you went over to Nick was learning in this new way, right? So it's
Mhm.
still writing, but it's tapping into the mind of somebody else to ghostwrite for them. But what I love about that from leadership is it's still taking a root skill competency that you have, but it's using it in a new way. But what I love about it the most is you invested in yourself to get there. And this is
Yeah.
where I think a lot of business owners, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, they get so caught up in what they are doing, they forget to invest in themselves financially, spending the time. You paid money out to Nick. I've been speaking my entire life, but I've invested money in the last year into speaking on public stages, right? Speaking
Yeah.
at conferences, investing in myself. Even though I speak, it's a different context as a keynote speaker, right? And so
Right.
I love that aspect just to remind our listeners we're always learning. Leaders are learners, and you have to invest in yourself, and it always pays off. The payoff may not be financial, but it always pays off.
I would say eventually it'll probably be financial,
Yeah.
even if it's not right away. So one of the things that you highlighted is the investing in yourself. And I really do have to credit my husband for that mindset shift in me. When I was sick, and he, I mentioned the walker and the, you'll
Yeah.
figure this out. One of the things he would always say to me is, I'm betting on future you because you've always been a good bet. And frankly, you need someone in your corner
Absolutely.
who's saying that to you. And if you don't have someone, go find you someone. Pay a coach to tell you.
Hmm.
Find a person, find a group of other business owners, other entrepreneurs, because we
Yeah.
all need someone saying, what if it all works out?
Absolutely. We need those cheerleaders, people that inspire us, challenge us, and push us to be the best version of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So you get rolling in this. At what point did you found Connected Ghostwriting, your ghostwriting company?
Yeah, so that was November of 2022
Hmm.
when we officially S corped the situation. And I remember having a conversation in the kitchen with my husband and my kids, picking a name for the agency, because at this point I hired an editor, I was hiring writers, I was hiring an assistant, and so it was very clearly not just Maria Chapman anymore, right?
Yep.
And so we were tossing words around, and I just kept coming back to the word connected. And I was like, I need the word connected to be in it, because my entire business is built on connection.
Mm-hmm. So dive into that, though. What are the different layers of connection for a ghostwriter with that potential author?
Yeah. So, number one, all writing is about connection. You can't write effectively without it. You have to think of your reader, and you have to write as if you are telling them the story and they're sitting across the table from you with a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that connection first. And then all of my clients at that point, and even to date, have been referral based. So my entire business was based on the connections I made with others,
Yep.
right? And then the other layer is what you mentioned, the connection between me and my clients. And I always say that ghostwriting is a little bit like acting and writing at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
because I really do need to connect on a very deep level with who it is I'm writing for.
Right.
Right. And I have yet to have an author I'm working with not cry in my Zoom room.
Mm-hmm. Good for you. You're tapping into them.
And that level of connection is so important, because my clients then become more than just a client. They become more than just a partner in my network. They're now a friend.
Yep.
Right. I have two clients, and they are public about working with me. Um, they are jewelers here in Connecticut. Last name is Barabalt. And their book is coming out very soon. They've already started booking speaking engagements. They're texting me all the time every time they have something move forward with the book. The publisher said yes to the companion journal. So there's all this snowball effect for them, right? And they're reaching out to celebrate with me every single time. We're
That's
meeting
awesome.
for coffee to celebrate. Like, it's that connection sort of transcends the book project.
That's awesome. So, talking about this for a minute, because I know a lot of people, I mean, I'm a firm believer that everybody has a book inside of them, but writing
Absolutely.
a book is paralyzing for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? It scares them to death. And when they think about ghostwriting, one of the common concerns that I hear, well, I can't use a ghostwriter because they're not going to understand me. They're not going to understand my voice. They're concerned about their book having their voice if Maria or Connected Ghostwriting writes the book for them.
Yes.
So, what do you do, number one, to pacify that concern for them? But then, what do you practically do to actually identify their voice and write in their voice?
Yeah. So our first step when we're working with someone is to obsessively consume any content they have out there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And so you're a podcast host, you're a speaker,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I mean, your YouTube is playing in my ear
Mm-hmm.
for weeks before we start your book project. And what I'm doing is, number one, taking note of just your tone and the way you speak. But I'm also looking for specific phrases, specific words that you fall back on frequently.
Yep.
Um, I'm not going to say the phrase because it would give away the client, but I have one client who had this phrase she would say anytime something was surprising. And it was so unique. And it was like, that needs to be in the book at least 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It needs to be in the book in such a way that the reader goes, "Oh, this must be something for this person."
Yeah.
Because sure enough, if they go watch this person on YouTube, watch this person on social media, they're going to hear that particular phrase.
Yep.
And so I'm listening just for general tone and voice, but I'm also trying to pick out those little pieces. We have a process, we have a database where we house all of the client voice information that we gather. So all of those particular phrases go in that document. Um, I do a lot of word association with people. So do you want it to sound modern or traditional? Do you want it to sound inclusive or exclusive? Right. And so we're doing a lot of those things as well. And then anyone working on the project has access to the recordings that I do with those people. And so that is both, that's me. That's the writers, and I write plenty of the books that our agency puts together. But I have some beginner writers, so I can offer a lower tier pricing. And so if you want to pay a little less, we can put one of them on it. And then my editor also takes a look at all of that client voice. And the reason is my editor has edited things that I've written as me for years.
Yep.
So she's very clear on my voice. And she will pick out any spot in a book where she's like, I think you're eking through on this one.
Oh, nice.
This is a little bit too much you and not enough the client.
Yeah.
And so that level of oversight is really helpful.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. So one more question on the ghostwriting. Assuming that the author is doing what they're supposed to be doing in a timely manner, from like the time that somebody signs on with Connected Ghostwriting to the time that we're ready to publish that book, what is a typical range of time?
I love a 6 to 8 month timeline.
Okay, that's pretty tight.
Yeah. I like it because it keeps things moving. Right. The problem is if you let a book project sort of go on for too long, every single person working on it gets sick of looking at it.
Yep.
I have so many people come to us because we do full manuscript writing, but we'll also take your first draft and then get it over the finish line. We call that a co-writing project.
Nice.
And so I have so many people who come to me with their first draft and they're like, I can't look at this anymore. Please help.
That's great.
And so I like the tight timeline. I have clients who slow the timeline down either because they want to stretch payments out or, something comes up in their business and they just need a minute, and that's fine. But I really do like a 6 to 8 month timeline.
Fantastic. I love
It
it.
also, that gives you enough lead time too to start building the buzz about the book so that when you're looking at publishers, the publishers look up your social media and they're like, oh yeah, they are talking about this content. This is the right person to write this book.
So that opens up another question. I thought that was my last one about this because I want to transition to Journey to Success, but you just said something that perked me up a little bit. The big debate for people, even with the ghostwriter, is self-publish versus seek for a company to publish it for them. How do you help writers navigate that bridge?
So I have connections with a few independent traditional publishers, with some hybrid publishers, and with some people who help folks self-publish. So I have had clients do all three.
Yeah.
My suggestion for which is the best option for you depends on who you are. And so what I'll say is if you're someone who is a serial entrepreneur, that tells me a couple of things. But the most important thing it tells me is that you do not like to build your house on someone else's sandpit. And if that's who you are, hybrid or self-publishing is a better option because you retain 100% of the royalties. You also retain 100% of the creative control. So with traditional publishing, one of the things that can happen is your book can end up being something you didn't intend. Because you do give up some of the creative control. I've also had authors who publish with traditional publishers, and then that traditional publisher wants to have oversight on any talks they give about the topic related to the book. So you can't just throw together a PowerPoint presentation and, give it to this organization without going through the publisher. And for someone who's a serial entrepreneur, that feels like a cage.
It could, absolutely. Yeah, I see what you're saying about depends upon who the person is.
Yeah. And so hybrid publishing I love, because with hybrid publishing you can get the distribution to bookstores that you get with traditional publishers,
Hmm.
but you don't give up the rights to the royalties or the creative control. So
Interesting.
that's a nice little sweet spot. And then
It is.
self-publishing, if you're a business owner and you want to self-publish your book, I think that's great. But really be clear about how much time you have to invest in learning how to self-publish, because you
Mhm.
might be better off just paying someone to help you with it.
Yep. No doubt. All good information, listeners. I hope that helps, because I know a lot of you are looking to write that book. And if you want to get more information about connected ghostwriting, you can find in the show notes ways to reach out for that. Let's transition though. You also have another company. You're that serial entrepreneur. Journey to Success. What is that all about?
Yeah, so Journey to Success, we actually just got our 501c3 nonprofit status
Congrats.
at the beginning of this month. Yeah, I'm excited about that. So Journey to Success is an organization that helps people who are disabled mid-career start or scale businesses.
Okay.
And so if someone's been listening since the beginning, they can pretty much figure out why I built this
Yep.
organization.
It's a passion play for you.
It is, absolutely. But one of the big things is I'm leveraging my network, and I'm using my network to help these folks start businesses.
Okay. So kind of walk through then like an ideal client for Journey to Success. What all are you providing for them? How does that work?
Sure. So Aline Brennan is actually she's one of our participants right now. And I'm allowed to talk about her. So let's do it.
Sure.
So Aline is someone who has MS, and she is a nutritionist.
Hmm.
She has worked in corporate settings, and after diagnosis that became more challenging,
Sure.
so she moved into private nutrition coaching, but she specifically coaches folks with autoimmune conditions on how they can use
Hmm.
nutrition to improve their outcomes. And so she came to us, and she had a successful model already with her individual coaching. But the trouble is, when you're navigating a condition like MS, your time and energy are both limited,
Right.
right? And the anecdote for a time and energy deficit in entrepreneurship is delegation.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to delegate if you're not profitable yet.
Hmm.
And so that's where we come in. So, Journey to Success, we provide a grant stipend to the people that we mentor,
Wow.
and we provide coaching and mentorship. They're getting it from me. We also have some coaches that we're partnering with who offer a discounted rate on their coaching services for folks through our nonprofit. And so we are with Eileen, we are working on creating an online course
Hmm.
for her that teaches her principles of using nutrition to manage autoimmune conditions, because it's a lower cost than her one-to-one coaching. It frees up her time, and
Right.
it's scalable in a way that one-to-one coaching is not. And so the course is about to launch, but now we're also looking at licensing it to hospitals and functional medicine practices to help.
Fantastic. I love that. So I'm just kind of looking at the full scope of that. We'll stay on her as the example
Yeah.
of this. Because you now have the 501c3 status, you can acquire foundation money, things like
Yes.
that, grant money you would pass along to help them out. The actual services you're providing to somebody like her is that one-on-one coaching, strategic ideas. Do you do anything beyond that with the business, like developing the strategy plan, developing the business plan, finance plan?
Yeah, the whole thing. So, my husband's a CPA. He's actually involved in the
Okay,
nonprofit, so he does some small business finance coaching with our
nice.
participants and walks them through really just setting up a finance system that they don't have to manage every day.
Hmm.
Um, and we're really focused on, let's figure out what your area of genius is,
Hmm.
and let's really hone in on that and try to outsource the rest or
Good.
automate the rest. And so we're working on systems, we're working on processes. Um, for Aline, one of the things we did is we hired a virtual assistant. And so she's got 10 months of a virtual assistant paid for by the foundation, um, so that she has someone to help her build these SOPs and get
Yeah.
this course done in a time frame that she wouldn't have otherwise been able to. Um, and then the other thing that we're building with Journey to Success is we're building a Journey to Success Academy. And so it's an online
Okay.
course hub that has everything from, how to write a business plan to how to delegate, how to write a job description. All of that
Fantastic.
is going in there. And so that's really, the donations we're collecting now, we're focused on that online course hub because, again, it's scalable and it's something we can use to help more people than we can with one-to-one mentorship. And so we have people who are, who have expertise and they're throwing together a course for us to load in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a way that they're participating. And then we have, I'm putting together a bunch of courses and the rest of our team is as well.
Right. That's awesome. So how do you find clients for Journey to Success, or how do they find you? Is this somebody who has had some sort of an issue their entire life? Is it somebody who's had an incident or disease and it's new to them? What's the ideal client there?
Yeah. So we're specifically focused on people who are making a mid-career pivot.
Okay.
And the reason for that is if someone is born with a condition, oftentimes they're receiving services all the way along. But the trouble is that when something happens in the middle of your career, there isn't anything.
Right.
Right. I remember when the Social Security office denied disability for me, and they said, we agree that you can no longer teach, but we think you can work in some capacity. And I said, I agree with you. And I said, what programs exist to help me make that switch? And the guy on the phone kind of chuckled and said, oh, we don't do that.
All right. So you're filling the gap. Fill the gap that's there.
There you go. Yes.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And your story obviously is going to resonate with those clients because you're not doing this for any other reason than giving back in the way that you were impacted.
Yes. And one of the unexpected benefits that I'm seeing is that the coaches who are working with our participants are picking up on ways to make what they do more inclusive.
Go a level deeper on that. I know what you're saying. Go a level deeper. Give us an illustration of that.
So I have a coach that I met. It's not someone I worked with, but it is someone that I like, know, and trust. And at one point he said to me, well, why don't you have an online course that teaches people how to write a book? And number one, I'm working on it. But number two, at the time, what I said was, I haven't had the time. And now I could have phrased it as, I haven't prioritized that yet. Right. But the truth is, when I started my business, I had 5 hours a week that I could work. And then as my health improved, the time I had available to work increased. But I never had 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours a week to work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the response I get when I say, oh, well, I just haven't had the time, this particular coach said, well, no, that's just an excuse. Everybody has the same 24 hours in the day.
Yep.
And I said, okay, let's diagram this. And so I walked him through, like, this is my week. I literally opened up my calendar. Here it is. I have physical therapy 3 times. I have a neurologist appointment. I have an infusion that takes 8 hours. I have this, I have that. I have kids, right? And so I plugged all that in and I said, how many hours a week do you see that I have open to work? And at the time it was 15. And I said, okay, show me your calendar. And this is a single man, not married, no kids.
Yep.
Perfectly healthy.
Should have had the whole week, right?
Well, it's just different. And if you're coaching, especially coaching someone who has some challenges, being aware of that and having compassion for that, and knowing how to build a plan that works around it or works with it is really powerful.
It is. No, it's helping them see what they can do by looking past what they can't do. And it's that mind shift, right? And so many people get caught up, whether we have some sort of a sickness or illness or not, we all get caught up in what we can't do or what we don't think we have time for. In reality, spend our time doing everything that's really easy for us and not the important things. And
Yeah.
so the concepts you're teaching through your organization are actually similar to leadership concepts everywhere. But I love the fact that you're being mindful, sympathetic, and empathetic to the fact that your audience only has so much capacity, usually because of physical limitations.
Yeah. And, I have a client right now that we're working with, and she comes to every call and she's so excited and she wants to do everything. She wants to fit everything in. She wants to hit deadlines that we set and things like that. And, one of the ways I have to coach her is we're setting a deadline so that everyone's on the same page from an urgency standpoint. But if the deadline gets pushed back a week because you needed more rest, like, you're the boss.
Yep.
This is your business. So you just change the deadline. It's not like there are no rules. Nobody's going to get you. No one's in trouble. And so that's something that we're constantly coaching with. And then, I have someone said to me, I came from the corporate world. And so I'm used to the go, 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 push, push, push. So if you need me to work more hours than I am right now in order to participate in this program, I can totally do that. And they just said it in this manic sort of way. And I just said to them, and this is someone who was in a wheelchair at the time. And I said, have you tried to climb a ladder in a wheelchair? And she said, well, no, why would I? And I said, well, why are you trying to climb a corporate ladder that wasn't built for you?
Nice. Yeah.
It just wasn't. You need a ramp.
I love it. I love it. Helping people just see things from a different perspective and understand. And, part of what you're sharing here comes through with our coaching of executives is you're sharing with them. It's not about doing the things to be effective in business. It's about becoming a business leader. It's about becoming, not doing. And
you have to be the person first.
Yeah. And as you become the business leader you were created to be, great things are going to follow. But if it's about checking things off the list and saying, I've got to work 80 hours a week to do this, you may be successful in the eyes of the world with like revenue, but you're not going to feel purposeful and connected to it and feel like you're a success because you haven't become what you're supposed to be.
So you came back to connected again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a big word for me. It's a big word.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, Maria, it's been great to have you on the Intentional Leader podcast today. We finish every episode with the same question. We like our listeners to have quick, applicable tips. So what is something our listeners can do intentionally today to be a more effective leader?
Reach out to someone new and try to make a connection. You can do it on LinkedIn. You can do it on social media. You can text someone you met at a conference last year and never followed up with.
Make the connection. Great tip. Great tip. I appreciate that. Well, Maria, it's been great to have you. Listeners, all of the links for Maria are going to be in the show notes below. Please do reach out to her, whether it be for ghostwriting services or whether it's in the journey to success. Maria, it's been great to have you here. We hope that you are blessed as you keep moving forward with both of those businesses. And we look forward to chatting again sometime down the road.
Yes. Thank you, Sean. It was good to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.